Pennsylvania is shaping up to be a battleground in more ways than one in November's elections. Not only is it going to be extremely competitive on the presidential and Senate level, but Pennsylvania holds two congressional districts that at this point in time are essentially a coin flip for either party. So that's the focus of today's video. We're going to talk about the 8th and 7th congressional districts of Pennsylvania and sort of analyze these districts based on the latest political trends and election results and kind of take a guess as to where they could potentially end up in November. Because as of right now, these districts really are a microcosm of the general election as a whole, because these districts have a majority of the white working class. And this was the demographic that handed Joe Biden the presidency back in 2020, because Joe Biden got a larger percentage of their vote than Hillary Clinton did, a sizable enough percentage in order to carry him over the top in places like Pennsylvania. And, besides the collar counties around Philadelphia, the largest shift towards the left occurred in the Northeast, where these two congressional districts are. So, they're very indicative, potentially, of where the rest of the country is going to vote as a whole. And if Republicans are doing well in these districts and potentially flip them, not only could that give them the House, but it could be an indication that Republicans are having a good night in general. So we're going to get to all of that in just a second. But first, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. So before we dive into these two specific districts, I think it's worth taking a look at the generic congressional vote polling, because while this isn't necessarily how we choose which party controls the House of Representatives, it does sort of give us an insight into how voters are leaning in terms of their choice for their representative. And so far, Republicans lead by around 1 point. Now, this is actually more than Donald Trump's lead over Joe Biden, which is about half a point. And, a couple weeks ago, this was reversed. Donald Trump was doing a lot better in the polling against Biden, and the Republicans were actually down in the generic congressional ballot vote. And it was the Democrats that were actually up by, I believe, 1.5 points or something like that. So the polling is sort of reversed. And, it's a little volatile at the moment. If we go back to July, you had Democrats leading these polls for a while, then Republicans, then Dems, then Republicans, then Democrats, then Republicans for a very long time, basically from the start of 2024 all the way to April. Then you saw a shift, Democrats led briefly, and now the Republicans are up again. So this is really just a snapshot in time, and obviously this is going to change. But I figured we'd take a brief look at this because I think it, again, provides us an insight into how voters might be thinking about the elections in November, because Republicans have the thinnest of majorities. I believe there's only one Republican standing in the way between Democratic control at this point, because you had Santos expelled. You had a couple of special elections. Those representatives still need to take office. And in fact, I think last night there was a special election in Ohio where the Republicans won. It was a safe Republican district, but they massively underperformed. So, perhaps that's maybe an indicator. Again, this kind of reminds me of the special elections back in 2022, where right after the Dobbs decisions, you had Democrats overperforming 20-30 points over where they typically were back in 2020. So again, special elections aren't always indicative of the following election results, but again, they provide a snapshot in time. So, if Democrats are overperforming, perhaps that's a sign for things to come in the fall. But anyway, let's get to these districts now. We'll start off with the 8th congressional district. Now, back in 2022, Matt Cartwright, who is the incumbent representative, he's represented this district for several terms now. He's been in office, I think, at least since 2014, potentially even before that. But he won his last election by almost 2.5 points. This was a district that was carried by Donald Trump by 3 percentage points. So Matt Cartwright overperformed him by around 5-6 points. And that's pretty impressive because, as a Democrat in a Trump district, you're already at a fundamental disadvantage. And I think the reason why Cartwright remains strong here is because, one, down ballot, this is a bluer district. Places like Lackawanna County, Monroe County, they're usually bluer down ballot when it comes to more statewide and local races. Even Luzerne County, very similar story. And obviously you also have the fact that Cartwright is well known and he's well liked in this congressional district. I remember back in the 2022 midterms, he was running this ad in northeastern Pennsylvania that basically had a Republican and a Democrat sitting on a bench, and the Republican was like a MAGA Trump voter. And, these two voters shouldn't agree on anything, but the only thing they agreed on was that Matt Cartwright was a good representative for the district, and, he was securing funding and standing up for the unions. So, he does have this bipartisan aura to him, even though Matt Cartwright votes with the Democrats virtually 100% of the time. There's nothing really bipartisan about Matt Cartwright, but he sort of has this Sherrod Brown, Bob Casey, everyman, blue-collar image that he's cultivated around himself. Kind of reminds me of John Tester, and it works. I mean, if you look at some of the county results of the district, Wayne County, Pike County, these are basically around the results that we saw for Donald Trump back in 2020. 66% of the vote for the Republican. That's basically where Bogdan was at. He was 65. So, Matt Cartwright doing maybe like 3 points better in Wayne County. Pike County, you have 60-40. That's pretty much the result you had back in 2020. Lackawanna County is where you see like the biggest shift in Cartwright's direction, because back in 2020, Donald Trump got 45% here. Joe Biden got 53%. Joe Biden won this county by a little over 8 percentage points. Jim Bognet wins this county by 18. So massive overperformance there. Lackawanna County, Scranton, huge Democratic advantage when it comes to the down ballot races. It tends to vote more Republican at the top of the ticket. And then as you go further down to sort of the local offices, that's when you see Democrats cracking 60%, Republicans only getting somewhere in the mid-30s. And Jim Bognet honestly was lucky to get 41% of the vote here, especially given how bad Dr. Oz and Mastriano did in this county on the exact same ballot. Most of Luzerne County is also in this district, and this was a county that voted for Democrats since 1992 and then flipped to Donald Trump in 2016 and stayed with Donald Trump by a considerable margin in 2020. So this was one of those 2 times Obama counties that flipped to Trump and doesn't look like it's going anywhere in terms of staying voting for the GOP. It looks like it's going to stay a GOP county for the foreseeable future. Now, even Dr. Oz won Luzerne County by 9 points, and he was very weak among sort of the white working class. But, Doug Mastriano very narrowly lost this county to Josh Shapiro. But Doug Mastriano lost Beaver County, and that county has been voting Republican since either 2004 or 2008. So I guess that's not saying a whole lot, since Doug Mastriano lost the state by 15 points. You also have Monroe County, which is a blue-leaning county on the border of Jersey. It's really, I think, the outermost county in terms of the New York City metro area. That might be Pike County, Monroe County. Think the Poconos, think a lot of transplants. A lot of people in New York City, Manhattan, have summer houses here. And some of them even live here, and they commute into the city a few times a week, and they vote here, and they vote Democratic. I mean, this was a county that was won by George Bush both in 2000 and 2004 very narrowly, and then swung massively for Obama in 2008 and kind of stayed with him for a safe margin in 2012. I believe Obama got 56% of the vote here both times, or somewhere around there. He was very strong in this county, and then Donald Trump almost won Monroe County back in 2016. So, this is not really a bellwether county, but it's obviously a decent portion of the district. And, if a Republican is going to be able to flip the 8th congressional district, they need to run up strong margins in the Luzerne County part of the district. They need to at least get 44% of the vote in Lackawanna County, and they need to get around 48% of the vote in the Monroe County portion of the district. And then perhaps you'll be able to win the district outright, because that's basically where Donald Trump got in the district. So, figure maybe do a couple points worse, barely win the district. That's what it would take. Now, if we take a look at some of the fundraising for the 8th congressional district and some of the data here, Matt Cartwright is by far and away the leader when it comes to fundraising. Nearly $2.6 million raised, $2 million cash on hand. His Republican opponent has only raised comparatively $700,000. Now, these fundraising reports are back from December 31st of last year, so I'm sure they're outdated, and I'm sure these candidates have raised more money. But I don't doubt for a second that the Democratic Party has a lot more funding into this race, because Matt Cartwright is an incumbent, and this is also a critical seat that Democrats need to hold on to if they want to control the House, because if Democrats are losing the 8th congressional district, they're potentially losing similar districts in terms of demographics around the country. So obviously it's very important for them to hold on to it. Oddly enough, despite the fact that this district has voted for Donald Trump twice, I do think Matt Cartwright has the advantage going into this race. So if you were to ask me to categorize this race, I would say it leans Democratic personally. I mean, Donald Trump could win this district again, and he probably will. And Matt Cartwright could still win, because he's shown that even when Donald Trump is carrying his district by 10 points, And that's what we saw back in the 2016 election. Donald Trump carried Matt Cartwright's district by 10 points. He still managed to win by around 7. So Matt Cartwright is a very, very strong incumbent. And this district was gerrymandered, funny enough, to represent the bluest parts of northeastern Pennsylvania. You have Scranton, you believe you have parts of Wilkes-Barre potentially, you have Monroe County. Schuylkill County down here is probably the reddest part of the district. But, you know, this district was drawn to be a very, very blue district. And that just goes to show you how much Donald Trump has swung a lot of northeastern Pennsylvania in his direction, that a district that was safe blue back in 2012 is voting for Donald Trump by 10 points. So, again, just shows you that Matt Cartwright is a very, very strong incumbent and should not be underestimated. Next, we move on to the 7th Congressional District. This is Susan Wild's district. Unlike the 8th Congressional District, the 7th Congressional District actually voted for Joe Biden by, I believe, half a point, at least the current district. If we go back to 2022, Susan Wild won this race by just 2 points. So again, Matt Cartwright won by around 2.4. Susan Wild only wins by 2. So the fact that Cartwright is doing better than Susan Wild in a redder district also shows you that, again, he's a strong incumbent. Susan Wild, she tends to win by a similar margin as other Democrats that carry the district. You know, Joe Biden won this district by half a point back in 2020. I believe Susan Wild, I think, won by a point, something like that in 2020. Although the district was a little bit different back then. The 7th Congressional District, I don't believe had Carbon County. Actually, it was around a 4-point margin of victory. But Carbon County wasn't in the district. That's the reddest part of the district. 65-35, a 30-point margin for the Republican. Northampton and Lehigh County, I think, are the most important parts, though, because obviously they're the most populous parts of the district, but they're also bellwethers. Northampton County in particular is a bellwether county. Trump won Northampton County by nearly 4 points back in 2016, and in 2020, Joe Biden narrowly won Northampton County by less than a point. So this is a bellwether of bellwethers, you know, similar to Erie County, Pennsylvania. Both of these counties went to Donald Trump by a plurality in 2016, ended up voting for Joe Biden in 2020. So, you know, this part of the district is super important. So if the Republicans win here, they probably win the district overall. Again, Susan Wild won Northampton County by 2 points, and she has a majority of around 4,000 votes. So if you really flip that around, you get very close to flipping this race entirely. The Republican just needs to do a little bit better in Lehigh County. Now, Lehigh County is a blue county. This county hasn't voted Republican since, I'm assuming, around 1988. I know George Bush got very close to winning it both times in 2000 and 2004. Donald Trump wasn't that close to winning the county. He lost here by around 5 points. And then fast forward to 2020, Joe Biden wins by around 8. So these counties are, again, indicative of Pennsylvania as a whole. Northampton County, white working class. Allentown, you have white working class areas. You also have a Hispanic population in Allentown. And obviously that's a demographic that's sort of been up for grabs, at least for the GOP. You know, not that they'll win it outright, but that they'll do potentially a little bit better with them. But, you know, this district, just like the 8th Congressional District, the Democrats have the advantage when it comes to fundraising. They almost always have the advantage in fundraising. $2.1 million raised by the Democrat as of December 31st, 2023. And the Republican, Ryan McKenzie, only had about $200,000. Now, this is before the primary. So, again, this is not really current information. Perhaps in a future video, we'll go over some fundraising figures for some of these key races. It's labeled as a toss-up by most of the big pollsters. Inside Elections has it as Tilt D. As of right now, I certainly think this district is a toss-up. I think if Donald Trump wins the 7th Congressional District, he'll probably carry the Republican over the finish line. Can't say the same about the 8th Congressional District. That's sort of a different story just because Donald Trump has had a history of winning here, and Matt Cartwright has had a history of winning here while Donald Trump is also carrying the district. So, again, as we said in the beginning, these districts are both toss-ups. We're going to talk about them more in a more broad sense, probably when we start doing some House predictions, which we might do a little bit later in the summer. I don't really want to start them too early because I think that's a little nonsensical. There's still a lot of time before the election, but perhaps maybe in July or August, we'll do sort of a first round of House predictions around the country, and then we'll do a follow-up probably in October, beginning of November, right before the general election. But anyway, that's it for today's video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification so you miss any more videos I put out. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.